we are who we are everywhere in life. And I think it's really kind of this leftover industrial age thinking that so many of us still think, well, there's business me and then there's personal me, or there's business me and there's spiritual me, or there's business me and there's family me. We are who we are everywhere.
Welcome to Warriors at Work. This is Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host. Warriors at Work is a place where everyone in the workplace can come together, gain insight, encouragement, tell stories, connect, and share wisdom. We are a place of like-minded people at different stages of life, all coming together with a shared interest of enlightening and inspiring one another. If you're interested in going from the predictable to the potent, and you want to find your warrior magic, step into the journey with us. Welcome to Warriors at Work. Hi everyone, it's Jeannie Coomber, your guide and host here at the Warriors at Work podcast. So today we're talking about transformation. Yes, transformation. We have all had experiences of imposter syndrome, feelings of not being enough, fear of failure, maybe it's even fear of success. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to not have limiting beliefs and to be aligned with who you truly are at your core, and to figure out through that what really matters most and how do I step forward into the life that I really want for myself? My guest today is Spencer Snakard. She is a transformational coach who helps entrepreneurs move through things like fear and doubt and not enoughness. And she also allows for us to figure out how the heck do we live authentically, vulnerably, and with courage, and move all those limiting beliefs out of our way. And here's one of the cool things that I really love about Spencer. She talks openly about things like soul and intuition in the same sentence as business success. And she has had quite a track record. She openly and honestly calls out how the identities and labels we have created for ourselves are holding us back. Let's break through and transform with Spencer. Welcome. So welcome to the Warriors at Work podcast. This is Jeannie Coomber. I'm your guide and host on this journey. I am thrilled to be in a conversation here today with Spencer Snakard. So Spencer, thank you so much for coming on and joining me in this conversation.
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to get to bring this to your audience.
Yes. And as I was saying to Spencer before I even hit the record key, what I love about her is beyond her energy and her perspective in the world is we share so much in common in terms of our values and what we see in the world. So I feel so pleased to have a bit of a soul sister in this conversation with me who sees the power of business acumen, but also sees the power of spiritual acumen. And we're going to be talking about it in a lot of different ways. But everybody that's listening and watching is what my hope for you is this ignites something within you, perhaps that you could bring to your work or to your life. So Spencer, my very first question is you have an interesting story that got you into this transformation work. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, why this work?
Yeah. I think like so many of us, the older I get, the more I think this applies to most of us. I grew up in a somewhat dysfunctional home and really thought in many ways that I was broken, damaged, something was wrong with me, something was wrong with the world as I knew it. And I was very I guess I'm just inherently positive. In fact, I just recently, my Gallup Strengths Assessment and positivity was one of my top 5. So really, even as a little kid, I always kind of felt like, I know there's more, out there and there's more to life. And this isn't the only way people live. And I was very strategic even as in my teenage years to kind of position myself almost into some surrogate families, like good friends I had that had sort of that the more desirable home life than what I felt like I was having on my own. And so just kind of found ways to set myself up or create the space that I really wanted to to be living in. And I think so much of it was sort of a spiritual calling or faith or knowingness that I didn't articulate it that way at the time. But looking back, I think that was a big driver for me. And so I got a degree in psychology, because I wanted to help people. And of course, because, so many of us, I think, that go into psychology, we're trying to figure out our own psychoses and our own issues, which was certainly valid for me as well. But I knew through my studies, I was like, I don't want to work with people with extreme psychological issues. I really want to help people get the most out of life and live a life that they love and live their passion and live their purpose and be lit up and have life be everything they want it to be. And so when I got out of college, about a year after college, I very somewhat by happenstance, but I believe, there are no accidents or coincidences, I ended up discovering a 3-day weekend transformational training seminar that a friend was talking to another friend about. And I kind of overheard or heard part of the conversation. I said, wow, that sounds really cool. Could I do that? And so I went and did this 3-day transformational training seminar. And, this was before coaching even existed, really. Like, this was 1996. The ICF didn't exist. People like Marianne Williamson were just coming out. Not that I would necessarily refer to her as a coach. I think she's more of a spiritual guide. But a lot of the people that really have been the basis for a lot of coaching and personal development gurus in the current day, they were kind of just starting to come out at that point. And anyway, so I just knew like the first day of that weekend seminar, looking at the instructor work his magic with the concepts he was teaching and the breakthroughs people were having, and just the miracles that were unfolding in front of my eyes of people letting go of, decades of anger or resentment or things like that. I had eating disorders for 10 years, and literally in one conversation that first day in a group training with like over 100 people in the room, just from what he was teaching, I had this thought of like, I don't need this anymore. I don't need to hang on to this. I felt like it was going to always be this monkey on my back that I'd have to manage and deal with. And literally in one conversation, I was like, what am I doing? I don't have to be a victim to my own thoughts and feelings. I can let this go. And so just miraculous things like that happening that first day watching him, I was like, this is it. This is what I was put on this earth to do. So it was really miraculous. And especially to be at that point in my life, I feel so fortunate that I found it when I did. In some ways, I wished I'd found it even sooner. I would have had a much easier teenagedom and early adulthood. But
I feel you. Same way. Same deep.
Yeah. But I was so fortunate to find it when I did, and and not later in life. And so I worked for that company for a couple years. I went through all their programs first as a student, and then I worked with them for a couple years. And sadly, I found them at the end of their 30-year run in business. They ended up closing their doors. And so it ended up really kind of being a longer road to really doing this full-time as my full-time life's work. But I found a number of ways along the road. I ended up going into corporate America. This was around the time that like Stephen Covey's 7 Habits for Successful People was going on. And so I went into corporate thinking, well, maybe I'll do something like that. And it ended up right as I was about to get on track for that, the company got bought out, and the whole division I was going to get transferred to do that got obliterated. But I had the opportunity to work from home. And so I was like, all right, I'll just kind of keep my head down. I'll see what else I can do to live this work. I opened a yoga studio. I feel like I'm just going on and on and on, but it was a long road to get here, I guess is what I'm getting to. And yet I feel like I've always known it was my calling, and I've always known it's something I'm very passionate about. I see the power of it. I've experienced the power of it myself in so many ways, really over 25 years now of my life that I've been living and practicing and teaching and coaching others in this work. And I just think it's amazing stuff, and I want everybody in the world to have access to it. It's just literally life-altering.
I want to break down some of the things about you that I feel are such differentials. First of all, some of the things that you talk about on your website it's so revealing and honest and transparent. So for example, you talk, and this is just some of the magic that is Spencer, you talk about helping entrepreneurs increase profits by 300%, but you're also talking about mending relationships. Yeah. So talk to us about that. I'd love to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, I think we are who we are everywhere in life, and the work that I do with people, how I help people, and how the work of transformation, the magic of transformation works, is that it really gets to the heart of who we are as human beings and as spiritual beings. And I love that quote from the French philosopher that says we are spiritual beings having a human experience. But we are who we are everywhere in life, and I think it's really kind of this leftover industrial age thinking that so many of us still think, well, there's business me and then there's personal me, or there's business me and there's spiritual me, or there's business me and there's family me. We are who we are everywhere. And so, part of it is when we create breakthroughs in one area, and if the focus is business or, profitability or direction, vision for the company and where it's going, if we're creating breakthroughs in that area, by default, we're creating breakthroughs in other areas. And the interesting thing too is that it's really like, it always excites me when I see how directly intertwined all of who we are is with this. Like, there was one client that I was working with where the very first session we had, she said something about how she'd been in business a number of years. She was struggling for quite a while. She had just within the last couple months, but when we first spoke, started hitting consistent $10,000 months, which is about 120 a year. And she said, but I'm not one of those people that wants to make seven figures, because more money equals more problems, and I'm not interested in that. And so already there was this clear limited belief about more money equals more problems. And as we talked a little more about it, it also became apparent on that first session that she had this belief that the better she does in business and in career, the worse things are going to be in her relationships, because she had gone into business with an ex-boyfriend, or obviously at the time a current boyfriend, but she'd gone into business with a boyfriend. The business started doing very well. They did turn it into $1 million+ business. And the more successful the business got, the worse the relationship got. And she ended up feeling very lonely and very unfulfilled and dissatisfied with so many things in life, and ended up walking away from all of it and felt like she lost her investment into the company, and she'd lost her love and her investment into the relationship. And so she didn't want that anymore. And I picked up very quickly on that first session. I said, I'm getting there's like an either or here. And she said, well, yeah. And it was kind of like, when she thought about it, she was like, well, but that's because that's how it is. She said, well, when I think about it, everyone I've ever known in my life who's really professionally successful has like hardly any money and therefore almost no freedom. And they can't travel. They can't buy the things they want. They can't do the things they want. Did I just say that backwards? I may have just said that backwards. The people that have the professional success are personally miserable, and the people that are personally happy don't have any money, essentially was the gist of it. Mm-hmm. And so we talked about it some that first call. And a week later, when we talked again, one of the first things she said was, she's like, it was so interesting. I flew to, she lived in Europe and flew to another country for the weekend, because that's what they do there, right? So she'd flown somewhere, and she said, I noticed all these people in first class were couples, and they all seemed really happy and like crazy in love with each other. And I'm figuring if they're flying first class, they must have money. She's like, I've never noticed that before. I've never even seen anything like that. So just by opening that possibility, that thought of like, maybe it's not true with a capital T, that if you succeed professionally, you're going to suffer personally, or vice versa. It started to open her mind to starting to see evidence for other possibilities. And through our work together, that was, I believe that was just a 3-month engagement that we had together. By the end of the 3 months, her business was up to consistent $20,000 months. So she doubled her revenue, and she'd met someone who she was very happy with. And we worked together again, like maybe 6 months after that, where she was up to consistent I think she's around consistent $40,000 months now, and is still with the gentleman she's been with for over a year now. I'm very happy together.
Wow.
So it's really like, I feel like we can't separate the two, even though we try to. And I think the fact that we try to is such a big part of why so many of us, I think, are empty or dissatisfied or feeling like something's missing. Or, I thought when I'd reach this huge level of professional success, I would be happy, I would be fulfilled, it would be everything I wanted, but it's not. And why is that? And it's because you're not bringing, my belief is it's because you're not bringing your whole self into it. It's like compartmentalized and sort of within a box or within rules that aren't aligned with who you really are and what you're here for, and ultimately what you really want, what matters to you and what you value, and all of that. So
I was just thinking of compartmentalization, which, as business professionals, we think we're really good at it. We think we're really good at saying, I'm this here and that there.
Yeah.
And that is hard as hell to do. To hold all of that up. And I think I heard this in a yoga class once, but it's very similar to the expression that you said, is everywhere I go, there I am.
Absolutely. Yep.
So when you think about this idea of transformation, and you gave great examples there about the professional self, the personal self, like what's the intersection? So when somebody's working with Spencer, how do you hone in on that intersection between those two? Like, what is it typically?
Yeah, well, I generally start with people. The first place we always start is, what do you want? What do you want? What do you really want? And I know I just said that like 3 or 4 times in a row, but that's because that's such a emphasis that I get to on, not just on a surface level, but really digging into what is it that really matters to you, and not what do you think you can have, but what do you really, truly, fully want? And what do you really want that's really aligned with who you really are, not with some identity or some belief of who you need to be or what you should do or what you can do. Like, let's take off all the limits and the boundaries and the quote unquote real world considerations and just think, okay, let's think for a minute, if there were no limits, no restrictions, what would your life look like? And I really start with, what would your life look like? Not what would your business look like? Because I believe your business needs to be designed to fit into the life you want, not try to squeeze or mold your life around the business that you want. They've got to go together. So we start with that. What do you really want? And with that, like, what matters to you? What do you value? What do you feel your purpose and your calling is? Who do you really want to be in the world? Again, not fitting yourself into a mold. And then, from that, like, that's actually the first part of my methodology, is alignment. And then from that, we start looking at, okay, now what are the aspects of our humanity that tend to get in the way of that? So it's really, I've really come in the last year or so, I feel like I'm really stepping into this new sort of space of owning this clarity about like who we are as spiritual beings. I feel is in regular inherent conflict with who we are as human beings. And neither one is good or bad or right or wrong, but it's a matter of like, I think who we really are is our soul level, our soul basis of ourself with a capital S. But then there's aspects of our humanity that, as we're in these breakable human bodies, there's an expiration date on these lives that we're living. And so we have very natural and logical fears that kick in that try to keep us safe and protect us from threats. So a lot of times when we, set out, like, if you've ever experienced something where you have this great inspired idea of some new amazing thing you want to do or some new direction you want to take the company, you're like, yeah, I'm going for it. And all of a sudden it's like one of those Roadrunner scenes where like he's like running off the cliff and suddenly he's like, oh my God, there's nothing under me. And we were tracked back. It's like that human fear kicks in of like, holy smokes, what was I thinking? What am I doing? What if I fail? What will people think of me? Who am I to think I could do this?
Or
we go
what if
through
we
all these
succeed?
Things. Yes. What if we succeed as well? Fear of success.
Success can scare the bejesus out of people to say, nope, that seems too big. That seems too extreme. I'm going to stay right where I am. Yeah. It's predictable. It's manageable. Yeah. And I have complete respect for that, if that is your choice.
Yeah.
But what you're really articulating is what's beyond the scope of what you can see, and how can you play with some of the edges.
Yes.
I'm curious, how often do you find yourself in conversations where people are like, I don't know what I want. I don't even know who I am. Yeah. I am at a place, and I see this a lot, particularly in corporate America, is people will wake up, even some that have gotten into senior level jobs, and they're like, I'm not even sure how I got here. Yeah. I got here because others thought that this was the right job for me, which turned into this job, which turned into this job. Yeah. And naturally I was getting promoted. But how often do you hear that where people are like, not really sure. I don't actually know who I am.
Yeah. Often is the short answer to that. But it's interesting. Like, I feel like almost seems to exist more in corporate America, especially at those upper levels, because I think so often, like you said, they're just getting promoted. People see something in them and they say, okay, this is great. There's a promotion, or it's more money, or it's more prestige, that sort of thing. And they sort of go with it. And then someday get to a point, like sort of a midlife crisis of sorts, where they get to a point and go, holy cow, what am I even doing here? And do I even want this? Did I ever even want this? Or maybe I wanted this 10 or 15 years ago, but do I still want this now? And so I think that is a very common thing that people experience. I shouldn't say I generally find, but thus far, I think many of the business owners that have come to me are business owners because they've already had that realization. They were in corporate America and had the realization that maybe it wasn't for them anymore, and they've made the move to business. But again, it's all, I think, part of our humanity. And even within business owners, there's often a stage where you're growing something, you're going down a path, and then suddenly say, wait, is this really it? Is this really what I wanted? Is this really where I want to be, or where I want to keep going? And so again, it comes back to that, like, what do you really want? Let's take a look at this. And when they say, I don't know, it's like, okay, let's, honestly, to some extent, sometimes it's like, all right, let's make it up. Let's design it. Let's talk about, let's play with some options and check in on how they feel, and talk about what seems great and inspiring about them, or what maybe seems not so great, or disempowering or unappealing about them. And the thing is that it's often like, sometimes it's anticipation of those unintended consequences on things. Like even when you just said a minute ago about like the fear of success, it's like the client that I mentioned that she didn't want to make 7 figures because she thought it would be too many problems coming with it. So sometimes even in that corporate path, it's like, okay, so what do we think is coming around the corner? And is that real? Is that like a valid expectation, or is it something else? But that fulfillment piece, I'm a huge fan of and believer in fulfillment being like, I think it's probably one of my core values, one of the top things of, like, to me, to do work just to do work is like, life's too short for that. Why would you do that?
You remind me too, is I think what we've seen in the last year is a lot of Groundhog Day.
Yes.
Very, very long days, 10, 12 hours on Zoom, WebEx, whatever.
Yes.
Pick your virtual poison there.
Yeah.
And you have home life in the other room.
Yes.
And there's not a lot of time or separation between the two parts of the self. But I'm hearing lots and lots of people sitting with the bigger questions.
Yeah.
To your point, they're not even calling it transformation, which I know is your jam and what you like to spend time in, but they're sitting with these questions to say, is this for me? Like, is this the life I want? How long can I stand this? Am I even showing up as best version of me anymore?
Yes. Yes.
And what could I be doing to play with some of the edges? And that's actually one of the questions I was imagining. What, for anybody that's listening or watching this and it's sparking some thought.
Yeah.
What are the ideas, suggestions, or things that you could put out into the conversation that can really help them move in some sort of direction?
Yeah. So there are so many things. My mind just I had an avalanche of ideas that came with that. So I'm thinking how to hone it in on some immediately applicable things. So not to beat a dead horse here, but I think the first thing, quite honestly, is to be looking at, what do you want? To be really just tuning into, am I satisfied? Am I feeling fulfilled with where I am? What is fulfilling and appealing about it, and what's not? To also look at, like, what are the aspects that you're not satisfied with? Because, the thing is too, sometimes it's not like you mentioned earlier, everywhere you go, there you are. Sometimes it's not the thing that has something missing. It's more a deeper thing within you on your perspective of life, quite honestly, like how you're viewing the world and how you're relating to and connecting with the world. And again, part of that first piece of alignment for me when I work with people, part of that is also on who you really are on a soul level. And I think a lot of times when people are feeling dissatisfied, it's because they're coming from a place of needing to meet or express or fulfill their identity, like who they think they need to be successful, to be to be accepted, to feel like they belong, to feel like they're worthy. It's oftentimes that disconnect is being driven by something that's more identity based, and the identity is really fear driven. Our identities develop to make up for the parts that we think we lack. So we think there's something wrong with us, or there's something missing, or we're not enough in some way. And we figure out, or we think we figure out, who we need to be and how we need to show up and what we need to do so that people won't see that missing piece of us.
Wow, that's so powerful what you just said. Oh my goodness, that just was like bing, 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 bing. I was just recalling loads and loads and loads of things in my childhood and upbringing right there.
Yeah.
Just building on this, because there's something else about your story, and you're so transparent when you talked about this just on your site, and it was so inviting to me. And I just wanted to highlight this because in my mind, like, you're very gutsy and very forthcoming with your own trials and tribulations, which I think is really another differential on how you do this work. And I want to hone in on some of them. So not only did you build a business, which was the yoga business, you built a house of your dreams. You ended a 14-year soap opera of a marriage. This is actually on your website.
Yes.
Finally realizing I deserve so much more and that life didn't have to be so damn hard. Yeah. You created the relationship of your dreams without dragging baggage from the past, which I think is also another huge differential. You coached your husband to start an international business he initially believed was impossible. And now he has grown from 0 to multiple 6 figures in 1 year and more than doubled the next year. You left your job, which you put in bold letters, and now make 3 times more than your 9 to 5. So when you think about all of those things, like, hone in on what was most transformative for you and why. You could pick one.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like I said before, we are who we are everywhere. And so all those different things, really, I think the most transformative piece came through in the process of the awakening of letting go the 14-year soap opera of a marriage, which turned out we weren't even legally married, was part of that, which I didn't know until after 14 years later. We had already split when I realized he was married to someone else when he married me. That just gives you a little taste there. Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was almost like a light switch for me when I realized, like, I deserved so much more than that. And I didn't even know at that point that our marriage wasn't valid or legit. It was just near the end of those 14 years. Something was going on actually with how he was interacting with my kids, who were they were 3 and 6 at the time, or had just turned 4 and 7. And something was happening. I was thinking, I am not going to have my babies be subjected to this. They deserve so much more. And I realized in that moment, I was like, holy crows, Spencer, you're someone's baby and you deserve so much more. And why have you been putting up with this for the last 14 years? And so it was one of those real life moments. Here's the thing with the work of transformation is that, like, life will give you life altering moments: getting married, getting divorced, birth of a child, death of a child, death of a parent, so many, critical illness. One of my clients came to me after she'd been in the ICU for 2 months and was now recovered and was like, I need to totally redesign my life. So life will give you opportunities to transform and totally shift your perspective. But the work that I do with people helps people do that without having to wait for those moments to rip the rug out from under you and turn things upside down. And so to answer your question of sort of what was the biggest moment for me, after I had split from my ex, and I was actually already now in relationship with who I refer to as Mr. Wonderful, my husband now. And I had been really struggling with, like, how could I have been so stupid? How could I have allowed myself to be so blind to so many things that were going on all those years? One of my friends said to me after he and I split, she was like, Spencer, I watched you shrink for him. You were this force to be reckoned with when I met you. And I literally watched you shrink in his presence, like, as you got deeper into the relationship with him, which I didn't realize at all. I had no conscious awareness of what was going on with that. And it hit me one day through doing the work I do and that I teach others with, I used some of my own tools. And I realized my identity coming from the home that I grew up in. And again, I think so many of us have certainly challenges from our past, if not trauma or dysfunction or other things. It's fascinating to me. So many super successful people I know have completely whacked out childhoods and pasts. And I think part of it for them is like given them the drive or the determination to overcome it and to rise above it. And so I realized for me, I was like, my identity was like that I can overcome anything. Not only will I rise up from the ashes, like not only will I survive what comes my way, but by God, I will thrive in the face of it. And I will come shooting out of the mountaintop with beams of white light coming out of every pore of my body. And you know, the angels singing, and I know like overly dramatic there, but that's how subconsciously it was occurring for me. Like, that's who I am. I'm an overcomer. And so when I realized that, I was like, oh my God, I wasn't stupid to pick him. I was freaking brilliant because he gave me millions of opportunities to rise above things that, you know, I could not only survive, but I could thrive in the face of. And so when I realized that, I was like, oh, it all makes sense now. And then in seeing that, it's like, okay, now I can kind of look out for, and I even have sort of enlisted other people in my life in supporting me in this and saying, okay, now I can look out for where I might be creating situations to overcome without even realizing it, because that's how we operate. It's not like we consciously say, oh, I'm going to show people how amazing and strong I am and that I can overcome anything, and therefore I'm going to find messed up situations that I can rise above. It's not a conscious thing. It's totally subconscious. We have no idea that we're doing it until we do some work to shine a light on it and then really get tuned into and aware of it and take those courageous, vulnerable, like scary step off the cliff steps to say, okay, I'm going to create something different here.
I had a chill when you were saying that story, especially when you said your friend saw you shrink.
Yeah.
That was like, ooh. And then the vision of that phoenix rising.
Yes.
I'm an overcomer. And talk about reframing a negative experience. Like, Spencer, that was unbelievable.
Well, thank you. One thing I just want to point out real quickly on that, because I think sometimes when I talk about identity and shifting that identity, I think some people feel scared or threatened on some level of like, but wait, my identity is what got me where I am. It's what's made me successful, or it's what has me feel safe. What if I don't want to give that up? And the thing is that a lot of times there's aspects of our identity that are very much in sync with aspects of our true self. It's a question of where are you coming from? Is it being driven by the true self, or is it being driven by the fear-based identity? So like for me, I feel part of my soul expression is like anything's possible and I can make anything happen. And you know, the world is my oyster, so to speak, and there are no limits. And if I'm coming from a soul-based place of possibility and opportunity and magnificence and we haven't talked about this yet, but I have this very different idea of perfection, like sort of this divine perfection that we are. That's a very different experience than if I'm coming from a place of, I don't know if people think I'm good enough, or I feel like I don't belong here and I need to prove myself. And therefore I'm going to show people how I can overcome. Totally different experiences, even though the aspects of it are similar. So it's really for me about being able to have the conscious awareness to even distinguish where you're standing on that, and then be able to choose freely instead of sort of being unknowingly dragged along by the fear-based side of things.
Yeah. And we're going to unpack some of the things that you just said, because when we were preparing for this conversation, you mentioned this idea that to truly thrive with freedom and fulfillment and the power to have that full impact, we have to release resistance and integrate that spiritual and human side. Yeah. I'd love for you to get to the brass tacks on how that works, and then lob in your perspective on perfection, which is a little different than how other people see this. So please tell us.
Yeah. So actually, I'll start with perfection because I feel like that's the foundation. For me, that's the foundation of everything, almost like the solid bedrock to stand on, that I've been referring to lately as the perfection principle, which is and again, it's a very different idea of perfection than what our cultural idea of perfection is. We tend to think of perfection or being perfectionistic as like you've got the 2.5 kids and you've got the perfect executive level job and you're making the awesome, however many, multi-6 or multi-7-figure salary and the whole, like, you go on the perfect vacations and all the things. And that is not at all what I'm referring to here. When I say perfection, I'm suggesting, I'll say, a perspective of you are an extension of your creator. And this for me isn't about like religion or doctrine, but just from a spiritual perspective, we can't, like, just as an example for people that might be a little more intellectual about this aspect, a way I can describe it is to say, no doctor could cut your head open and say, oh, there are your thoughts. Thoughts don't exist in our brain. We can see like electric, synapses, things firing that we translate as, oh, that's when a thought is happening. But thoughts are like this non-local intelligence, things that exist beyond our physical body. And so I think of it very much as like, we are soulful spiritual beings that aren't just this body. And you are an extension of your creator. And I believe God, universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it, doesn't make mistakes. And if we start to look at, you are divine and magnificent and, yes, dare I say, perfect, exactly as you are, exactly as you are made, and for all that you are and for all that you're not. And if we come from that perspective to begin with, if that's our starting point, as I am perfect exactly as I am, I have nothing to make up for, nothing to fix, nothing lacking. It's like there's not even any room for any of that other stuff, the fear, the doubt, the not enoughness. There's no room for that to even breathe. Kind of like how a fire can't exist, if there's no oxygen. There's a little bit of a reverse thing, I guess I'm saying here. But the idea is like fear and doubt can't breathe in a space of perfection, because you're already whole and complete. And so when we start there, like, that's really the starting point I do with people is, let's get to who you really are, what you're really here for, what you really want, what matters to you. And then let's develop some compassion and some understanding about the aspects of our humanity that come up and get in the way, and why they're getting in the way. Because we're wired to survive, because we want to belong, because we are in some ways physically disconnected from our creator, like just in the body we're housed in. We have limitations in these bodies. So we have a constant daily moment by moment reminder of what our limitations are. When you stub your toe and go, oh, that hurt. And so we have these constant reminders. And so when we can really recognize the two and start to integrate them, start to bring them together. And I refer to that step as reinvention, but it doesn't necessarily mean totally wiping away who you thought you were and starting over. It just means letting go, almost shedding the identity and those walls or barriers of protection that we think are keeping us safe, to shed those and become in every new moment like that authentic expression. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm here for. Here's what I'm up to. Being your true self, without coming from that place of needing to prove or make up.
As a mom of 2 daughters, I think, my goodness, how important that is to learn much younger in life.
Yeah.
Here we are having this conversation where we've both had long professional and personal lives. To talk about it through this lens is so important. So I'm saying this for myself as a mom, to talk about it the way that you're talking about it, but also as a being on this journey. And I was smiling to myself the next time my husband gives me a hard time, I could just turn to him and be like, I'm perfect. I'm a perfect being. And all of the things that I am, I bring the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is all part of my perfect being. It's very freeing when you say it that way.
Yeah.
And what it does is you're right, it fades away a lot of the shoulds, the labels, the experiences that others are pushing on us on a regular basis, but it takes us back to our truest form. Yeah. So I think the way that you begin an engagement and create some of those foundational elements is just just really hit me right there in the heart. And that is also what resonated with me when I was watching one of your YouTubes. You were talking about this idea of fully soul-based self. And that's really what you're talking about, is getting back into the essence of who are you? Why do you think you're here?
Yeah.
And it's often a question we don't sit with.
Yeah.
We look at, what's our to-do list?
Yep.
What are our obligations? What are the things that I have to execute on or complete by a certain date? How do I drive the business forward? How often are we also saying, How am I feeling? How do I want to feel?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that I want to bring forth into the world? And
Mm-hmm.
when we're fully integrated and fully aligned, we show up as an amazing experience and attract more into our lives, which is one of the things that I loved about all that you revealed about your personal transformation is like clearly you attracted in the things that you needed more and could do more with your own experience. I just absolutely love that. So let's talk about you now. More on a personal basis. So tell us who do you follow in the quote unquote transformational space, whatever you call this?
Yeah. I kind of phase in and out of like really eating up a lot of stuff and then pulling back a little bit from it, or just sort of just being with what is at the time. But I think some of the ones in the last few years that I've followed a lot, I love Brene Brown. I love her authenticity and how straight she is. And she very much puts her whole self out there and speaks very openly and candidly about her messiness and her humanity along the way. And it's fascinating to me because I think that she and I do a lot of the same kind of work as far as what we talk about and how we approach with people. But, she came to hers through many years of research. I was very fortunate to get it from a weekend seminar. And yes, I've done way more work since that. I'm not saying that was just a 3-day thing I did once. I've done loads of other trainings and certifications and things, but it's just interesting. We all kind of have our own way to our own path, I guess I should say, to opening up to, I guess, that next level of growth and development for us. So anyway, I love Brene. I listen sometimes to Esther Hicks. She's a little woo-woo. She's a little more woo-woo than maybe some of your corporate listeners might be into. But she also talks very much about that relationship. She talks about the relationship between you and you, meaning the spiritual you and the human existence of you, and how you know when something's off because you feel like something's off, and that's kind of the flag to tune into. All right, something's amiss here. And I also love. I recently read a couple years ago, and I still kind of go back and reread sometimes. Dawson Church wrote a book called Mind to Matter. Like creating things with your mind, essentially. But he's a scientist. I don't even remember what his area of science is, but he's a scientist and also speaks of faith as well. And it's interesting because he talks too, at one point in his book, about how people say, well, you're a scientist. How can you also be a man of faith? And he's like, how can I not be? Like, why do those two things have to exist separately? So he certainly speaks my language as well, as far as bringing your whole self and your spiritual being into all realms of life.
Thank you for that. I love that. So let's talk about your warrior journey, because obviously this is all about warriors in the workplace. What are you working on for yourself? Is there anything in there that you're really struggling with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a one-on-one coach of my own who I've been working with for over, I think, 2.5 years now. We've been working together. And I think, I think it's so important for everyone to have a coach. Quite honestly, I'm such a huge proponent of that. And I'll keep this tight. I know we're kind of coming up on our time here, but back to my yoga studio that you mentioned, I didn't have a coach during that time. And in hindsight, I now see where things could have been so much easier and so much smoother had I had one, and certainly so much more successful, because I can see where in places like that, I let my fear of what people would think of me or how I would be perceived get in the way of my success. Someone had made a comment early on about, I would never work with someone who's doing this just for the money. And I consciously, I was like, well, I know I'm not doing this just for the money. I'm passionate about it. And even if I am doing it just for the money, so what? I've got a family to feed, and there's nothing wrong with making money for a service that you provide. So that was my conscious thinking about it. But I realized that subconsciously, I can see 1,000 ways that I unknowingly sabotaged the financial growth of that business because I wanted to make darn sure that nobody thought I was doing it just for the money.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I really as I started into this business, I was like, I am totally going to have a coach of my own. And one of the things that that's really been coming up over the last year or so, all right, I'm going to go like super vulnerable and expose myself here, is one of my big things that we've sort of identified and been coming back to is there's a subconscious element for me of feeling like my voice doesn't matter. Like what I say, what I do, it's kind of just going out to nothing, like sort of to the ether, and it's not really making an impact. And again, that comes back to many years in the home that I grew up in, where things I would say or things I would do or even things I would pray for, like things didn't change. And so there's this belief that formed at a young age, which again, consciously I know better now, but subconsciously there's still sort of this lingering tag, I guess, for lack of a better word, that's like, it's not going to make a difference. It's not going to matter. You're not going to have an impact. And so I can see where there's places where that oftentimes that can get in the way. And so that's something that I'm constantly trying to stay conscious to and be aware of and notice where it may be showing up so that I can say, okay, all right, I get it. Thank you, little chatter voice in my head, for sharing. And I'm going to go for it now anyway.
I often refer to her as young Jeannie, little Jeannie. Thank you,
yes.
Jeannie. I appreciate your contribution. I appreciate your criticism because it's often not a very nice voice.
Yes.
I appreciate you. You're not what's needed right now. Get in the back seat.
Yeah.
So here's my last question for you. So let's talk about your warrior magic. What are the things that you're bringing to the world that are uniquely Spencer?
Yeah. I think one of the things I hear from clients a lot and from some of my followers is that I think a lot of what I bring is this idea of anything really is possible. You have the power within you. And I think I show it through my own life and through my own, what I share with people as well. But I've had a number of clients share that as feedback. They're like, you really have helped me see, like, I really can. Anything really is possible. I really can do anything. And I've had some other clients say to me that they also kind of get from me, like, no one's coming to save you. Like, don't sit around waiting for something else to happen or someone else to come intervene. Like, go out there and make things happen. But also, I think, a big part of it is I think part of my unique magic I bring to that too is, like, it's okay. It's okay to be a hot mess sometimes. It's okay to have those moments. And I really even encourage people, like, don't try to be so quick to move past those kind of icky realizations we may have or those dark moments. Like, sometimes you got to sit in those. You got to like roll around in the mud a little in it. And it's like, just be with it and experience it. And you're not bad and wrong for experiencing or feeling it. And if you try to too quickly pull yourself out of it and move past it, you're really not, you're not honoring it and giving it the space that it deserves. And let's not hang out there forever. So, like, experience it, and then let's look at, okay, now what? Now, what are you really up to? What do you really want? What do you really want to have happen here? And now let's go make that happen.
Oh, amen. Amen to what you just said. It's like trying to strike that balance.
Yeah.
So, Spencer, I'm so deeply grateful for you being in this conversation with me, talking about really transformation on a totally different level. I'm really appreciative to all of your wisdom and your insight here today.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be here, and I love the work you're doing in the world. Thank you so much.
And for anybody that wants to find Spencer, learn more about her, I mean, she's got a great group called the Mindset Mastery for Entrepreneurs Facebook group. She's got a great channel on YouTube. Her website is just a plethora of insights and resources. So stay tuned for more from Spencer. There's so much great stuff out here. Thank you again for being here today. So appreciative.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to everybody for listening to another episode of Warriors at Work and letting us be a part of your warrior journey. You can ask questions and make suggestions for future topics at jc@jeanniecoomber.com. Connect with me personally on LinkedIn and Instagram, and join us on the Warrior Conversations channel on YouTube and at the Warrior Magic Community page on Facebook. You can find links to all these places on my website, jeanniecoomber.com. And most importantly, be sure to tell friends about us, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Spreaker, and Spotify. It helps others find the show and puts more warrior magic out into the world.